My opinion about Streetlight Manifesto is I'm going to say they're a ska band, and my reason is because what was his name, Tokay?
Yeah.
He doesn't want to be considered a ska band because he's got a little bit of ska shame. So I say they're ska.
Yeah, you know, it's funny. It's like I consider him a ska band too. Like that whole argument. I didn't know about that argument until I started like joining all the ska Facebook groups. But like I made this point. It was kind of like a funny point. It was like I think they're ska because, for example, they have a song called "If and When We Rise Again."
Mm-hmm.
They do like this build up, and they stop the build up. And Tokay, I think the guitar player, right? That's his name.
The singer, guitar player. Yeah, Tokay. That's not his real name. That's like his short name. I can't remember.
Yeah, he starts that song off with like the meanest guitar skank I've ever heard, and like that guitar skank, as a guitar player, that's like the type of like technical guitar skanking that I try to match up with.
See, like ska bands have all kinds of things that they mix it with. He's just got a weird thing about ska. I mean, he doesn't interview hardly ever, and he didn't interview for me. Mm-hmm. But I've read and listened to a few of his interviews, and he's just not into being called a ska band. It's like going back to that feeling of it being like this source of shame or embarrassment to be called ska, even though ska is clearly a major influence on that band. And he came from being in Catch-22, which was a straight up ska punk band.
Yeah, exactly. And not only that, I mean, didn't Streetlight Manifesto like redo a whole Catch-22 album?
Oh yeah. I heard that the whole reason that happened was because of the label on Catch-22 was basically screwing them over. So,
okay. So
the only way he could like get the proper royalties was to just re-record it as Streetlight Manifesto. Right. I can't verify that that's true. I just have heard that story.
Yeah, I mean, hey, if that's the case, that's smart because that's definitely yeah, especially if the label's like fucking them over. I mean, that's definitely probably the right yeah. And then I just want to ask. I mean, I don't want to dive too deep into this chapter because it's definitely one it's definitely one to look at. Did Let's Go Bowling ever tell you how much cash they got for that band, man? Because 500. I can't assume they got more than 300, 500 bucks for that.
I didn't ask how much they got for it, but yeah, they ran it to the ground, and I'm pretty sure that Mark, the guy I interviewed. Mm-hmm. I don't know if he told me he's mechanically inclined, but I definitely got a mechanically inclined vibe from him. So I'm sure that they exhausted everything they could get out of that band at that point.
That's crazy. The fact that like it happened that way. I was just like reading that shit. I'm just like, holy shit, that's crazy because you would never even expect that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. So what we're talking about, just a real brief summary, is I have a chapter called Once Upon a Time in Riverside, where Let's Go Bowling played a show in Riverside. They're a band from Fresno, so that's a few hours away from Riverside. They're heading home super late, like 2 a.m. or 3 a.m. in the morning, going back to Fresno. And while they're on the freeway, the van gets shot up by just a random shooter somewhere, who knows where. And nobody gets hurt, but that's the basis of the story. Like they just take like 3 or 4 bullets to the van, which is a freaky experience. I remember hearing about that back in the day. It was sort of a rumor or like a thing that I never heard about it from them because I didn't know them. But I remember other ska bands had told me like, dude, Let's Go Bowling got their van shot up. And I was like, whoa, that's crazy. That can happen. Like at the time, I didn't even consider that your van could get shot up while you're on the freeway. I mean, I know it's like, obviously it's a thing that can happen, but you think of your van as a safe space, even though, you can get in a wreck, all kinds of things can happen, but you think of it as your safe space in a band, especially on tour. It's crazy to consider that.
Yeah, and like the craziest part when I was reading about how close it was to actually even hitting him. Yeah, that's just freaky, man. I'm just glad they were on the right side of luck that night, man. Because that's freaky. But hey, man, rude boys don't win, right?
Yeah.
To touch on this is like kind of like something that I feel like is a very important point. If you don't mind, I'm just going to quote.
Go ahead.
A lot of quote. It says the success of a handful of zany mid-90s ska punk bands that didn't pop out of nowhere. It was built off the graves of failed rude boys. I agree with that completely. And this is where I'm going, right? for example, I just saw Pick It Up, not Pick It Up, right? The documentary.
Yeah, Taylor's movie. Yeah.
A lot of the established musicians that made it, when the topic of the traditional fans versus the third wave bands, like the tensions, a lot of the third wave musicians that like were making it referred to like the traditional musicians as like sour grapes. It was always like some negative connotation.
Yeah.
Connotation. You know what I'm saying? That I don't really see traditional fans and modern ska punk fans even getting along today. Sometimes they do, and there's a lot of people that like it all.
That's a complicated thing, especially when you go back to the 90s, because the tensions got so high that you would see skinheads and rude boys coming to ska punk shows and just to give these new bands dirty looks. So a lot of those traditional bands are better musicians or you know, and they know a lot. And back then they knew a lot more about ska history than say a lot of the ska punk kids. A lot of ska punk kids would come to these shows and really did not know anything about it. They're just there to have fun. Yeah. So that I can understand why these, the more traditional type bands would get irked at them. But on the other hand, like ska punk bands and fans in the 90s were way more welcoming. They were basically saying, hey, this music's for everybody. Yeah. And that's definitely one reason why ska punk was the music that got bigger than traditional ska, because there was not this. The traditional stuff had an element of elitism to it, whereas the ska punk stuff did not. And they reached out to and got fans from other scenes. Yeah. So, however, I do think that the ska punk stuff had a better shot, anyways, just because punk rock was getting mainstream. And, you know, traditional type music is harder to categorize. Like, what is traditional ska? What's hepcat to 90s MTV? It's not exactly soul music. It's not exactly rock music. So I'm sure that was just way too difficult for them to categorize. Whereas like Real Big Fish, yes, it has horns and that's weird, but it is like pop punk-ish too. So that seems a little bit easier to categorize. So I think it's really complicated if you want to get into the traditional versus the non-traditional bands, because I definitely, as a kid, I liked all of the music, but I definitely identified more with the ska punk crowd because I didn't like the elitism of the skinheads and the rude boys.